My name is Noel. I still have a custom-made suit hanging in my closet from when I didn't enter a room, but when I did, people stood up. I used to think that authority was a voice that cut through the silence. But now I know, the scariest thing is when you speak and the silence doesn't hear you. I live in a small house on the outskirts of town, where the asphalt still has the scars of post-war concrete, and the trees bend more from old age than from the wind. My home is not a fortress, but a cage. Every day begins with silence and ends with the same. Sometimes I even catch myself thinking, was I even alive today? My children are successful, confident, with those cold smiles you see in people who are no longer surprised by anything. They have big houses, but for me there is not a single corner. Calls? Once a month. It's more like a mandatory check, like crossing off a to-do list, talk to dad. And the grandchildren. They look right through me, like I'm a TV that hasn't received a signal for a long time. Once I asked one of them to help me move a box of firewood, and he sighed so loudly that in that silence I could hear the full depth of his irritation. After that, I didn't ask anymore. From now on, I just put the firewood on the ground and drag it across the floor. The sound of the wood is at least some sound. No one looks at me in the store. I hand over the bills, but I don't get a thank you or a look. It's like I'm serving myself. The doctor? He talks to the wall while I'm sitting on the couch. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, what if I don't come tomorrow? Will anyone notice? I'm used to being the one who decides. The one who is addressed. And now, when I open my mouth, it seems to me that dust and cobwebs fly out of it. My words are old coins that have lost their value. In the evenings, I sit by the window. Outside the window is a world that is no longer for me. The roads I once traveled on business now seem narrow and hostile. The lights turn on too brightly, as if to expose me as superfluous. In the closet is a stack of old notebooks. I look through them in silence. Once I wrote about plans, business meetings, the names of partners, the terms of deals. Now I write down the dates when I was not heard. The name of the nurse who threw my prescription on the edge of the table. The time when my son said, "We can't come, Dad, business." Sometimes I think, why don't they see? Why don't they understand that I'm still here? What do I see, hear, feel? That every minute of this indifference is like a nail in the coffin of my past. I am not a ghost, but they made a shadow of me. It didn't happen overnight. Indifference creeps in slowly, like rust on metal. At first I made excuses for them, life, work, worries. But now I know, they are simply used to my silence. And when silence lasts too long, they take it for consent. But I remember. Everything. Every look above me. Every word spoken not to me, but past me. Every then that never became a now. I am Noel. And I don't want to be silent anymore. I remember my hands when I was young. Lean, strong, always working. They held a hammer, a truck steering wheel, and later a pen when signing the first contracts. Now these hands tremble when I pour tea. But if I close my eyes, I am the same again. The one who started from nothing. At 27, I slept in a warehouse with my first product, spare parts that no one wanted to sell. At that time, they considered me crazy, I bet on the unobvious. But I believed in myself more than in stability. My business was born not from capital, but from stubbornness. I was not good. And I was not holy. I was ruthless when it was necessary to protect my own. When competitors played dirty, I responded more intelligently. Not with force, but with cold calculation. My fame grew not from noise, but from precision. I was a man of my word. And this word counted for something. Back then, I didn't know what it meant to be superfluous. People came to me to consult, to ask, to shout, to beg. Everyone was waiting for my decision. I was the center. I was the answer. I kept the family afloat when it was tottering. My children saw me as a mountain. An iron pillar. I remember the night my first son was born. I stood in the hospital corridor, smoking one cigarette after another and thinking, so that he doesn't go through what I went through. I tore myself to pieces so that they could have everything. The best schools. Opportunities. The world under their feet. I thought it was love. And when I came home at night, when fatigue was eating away from the inside, I saw their faces, sleepy, peaceful. And I believed that all this was not in vain. Then the war began. My younger brother died, and I took his children to my place. I didn't ask, I just did it. I opened another business to support them. I was the foundation. A support not only for my family, but also for others. I sponsored a school, raised the neighborhood, repaired the roof of the local church. My name sounded with gratitude. And now, silence. No one remembers how I helped. No one remembers how I covered up. And most importantly, no one wants to remember. Because it's easier for them to see me as a frail old man, not a person thanks to whom they have everything. It's funny, but in my house, where the walls date back to the days when I laid bricks myself, I am now a guest. They left me a room with a narrow bed and an old TV that hums even when the sound is off. No one asks how I slept. No one shares the news. And when I start to tell something, my granddaughter says, "Grandpa, why are these stories?" Stories? These are not stories. This is my life. These are stories in which I survived. Loved. Fought. Betrayed, and restored trust. I was alive in each of them. And now all of this is garbage for those who are in a hurry to flip through the tape on their phone. I took up the records again. Not the old ones, financial reports, plans. No. New. Different ones. In them I record moments. Cold lunches alone. Disrespectful comments. Empty promises. All those little things that mean nothing to them. And to me, poison. A few years ago, I could have closed my eyes, and died in peace. And now, I feel something moving inside me. Something that doesn't want to die quietly. Because the past is not just history. It's a weapon. And I haven't forgotten how to use it yet. They didn't hit me. They didn't scream. But what they did was worse. Indifference is a slow suffocation. It leaves no trace, but it destroys you from the inside, inch by inch. It all started with the little things. I asked my son to help me set up my phone. He said, "Grandpa, you'll forget anyway." I laughed with him, because I didn't want to seem petty. But something inside was tightening. I asked my grandson to pick up medicine from the pharmacy. He didn't go. Instead, he sent an emoji in response. I sat in a chair with a fever, watching the snow fall outside, and thought, when did this become the norm? In the clinic, the doctor didn't even look up when I started talking about my chest pain. "Your age is the reason," he cut me off. I wanted to say, what about my experience? What about my life? Doesn't that deserve respect? But I kept quiet. Every time I kept quiet. Because I learned that an old man's word doesn't matter. Although once things started with him. One day I was sitting at the family table. They were talking about new cars, resorts that I would never see. I remembered how in the 80s we lived in the same room, and I was squeezing out my resources with all my might to give them a chance. I said carefully, "Do you remember how?" But my voice was drowned out by loud laughter. They were talking among themselves, not hearing me. And I was sitting there like a phantom. Then I started writing. Not a diary, but a dossier. In a notebook with a cover the color of dried blood, I started recording. Not thoughts, facts. Name, action, date. Alexej, grandson. March 15th. Called me a relic. Marina, daughter. April 21st. Didn't come to my birthday, didn't have time. Dr. Savchuk. June 2nd. Refused tests. Why? I didn't write this with malice, with clarity. Each entry is like a scar. Visible only to me. And then the day happened that changed everything. I was leaving the store. The road was slippery, the bag was heavy. A few things fell out, a can of canned food rolled along the sidewalk. I stopped and asked, "Excuse me, can you help me?" I turned to two young guys passing by. One of them chuckled, "Maybe you can make a sandwich, Grandpa." The other laughed, "He's talking too." I thought it was just a background drone. I bent down to pick up the things. My fingers wouldn't obey. People walked by, bypassing me like a pothole on the road. Someone even said, "Don't lie here, old man." And then, something broke in me. No, I didn't scream. I didn't answer. It's just. The world in my eyes became slower. The sounds became muffled. It was just a feeling, as if the old, buried Noel had opened his eyes for the last time. I returned home. I closed the door. Silence greeted me, as it always did. But this time it did not seem empty. It was filled with something different. Dark. Deep. The walls of my house were no longer a cage, they became the walls of an operating room. I opened my notebook. For the first time, I did not write, I read. Name by name. Like a list of those who had chosen contempt. I understood, each of them did not simply make a mistake. They chose to despise. Consciously. I will not scream. I will not complain. I will play a game that they can never win. Because I am Noel. And now I have nothing to lose. I don't wake up anymore. I turn on. I used to open my eyes and struggle for a few more minutes with the thought, why? And now I stand up in silence, like a mechanism waiting to be started. There is no more anxiety in me. There is no fear. There is only concentration. Cold, almost mathematical. This is new fuel. I started walking around the city again. But not like an old man wandering aimlessly. I observe. Analyze. I notice everything that previously slipped past my attention. Looks. Gestures. Whispers. The world seems different when you no longer expect good. People live in bubbles. They think they have the situation under control, until the usual disappears. Until someone touches a weak spot. And I know these places. Because I am the one who built a life on gunpowder. Now I am learning again. I sit on the internet for hours, reading articles about psychology, manipulation, and influence technologies. What was once my craft in business is now a tool in another game. I don't seek revenge in blood. My payback is a mirror they're afraid to look into. I found letters from old partners. Phone numbers that are still active. One of them is Boris Savenko, a former lawyer with a dubious reputation but invaluable connections. I called, the voice recognized me immediately. Noel? Are you still alive, old dog? He laughed. Alive, Boria. And I want to play one old game. Can you still, just talk, to the right people? After a short pause, the answer, if these people are still breathing, yes. And that was just the beginning. I compiled a list. Not just names. Scenes. Deeds. Tiny moments in which each of them turned away when they should have reached out. And I began to think of plans. Not explosions. Not poison. No. My task is to break the shell. Show them who they have become. And to do it in a way that they cannot escape from themselves. For my son, it will be a financial storm. I remember his schemes. I used to make them up myself. Now I have sent some documents to the right places, but in a way that makes it look like an accident. The system will tear them apart on its own. I am not a criminal, I have only highlighted where the crack is. I have organized an innocent mention for my grandson at the university, in the form of an anonymous complaint. About disrespect for the elderly. With quotes from his own posts on social networks. Let him explain. Let him feel that words have consequences. I arranged for a journalist I know to mention in a column the story about a successful family that forgot its father. Names are not mentioned. But those who should know will understand. None of this looks like an attack. It is irony. They themselves paint pictures of their downfall. And I am only holding a mirror. And in this silence that used to weigh on my chest, now I can hear concentration. Even a slight crackle is like an old system coming to life. I have a rhythm. Morning walks are observations. Notes have become maps. All my years, all my attention, experience, discipline are now focused on one thing, getting myself back. I am no longer the Noel who sat silent at the table, swallowing humiliation. That Noel is buried with the Ken that rolled down the sidewalk. And the one who has returned does not scream. He acts. For the first time in many years, I feel real. Because they say it's true, old age is not a sentence. It is a mask that can be removed. And now, when they see me, they look away again. But not because I am transparent. But because they are afraid. Because they do not know how much I have seen. How much I remember. And how quietly I can destroy. There are no screams. There are no explosions. There is only silence, the same one that used to press on my chest, but now has become my ally. Because silence is a space for thought. And thought is the most dangerous weapon. My transformation did not begin with revenge. It began with contempt, which became a formula. When you stop being an emotion, you become an architect. I became the builder of a new reality. Not for myself, for them. In which they themselves will destroy what they neglected. I created a system where each of them will receive a mirror. Broken. Without decorations. Without a frame. And I watched. First, my son. Vyacheslav. A successful investor whom everyone considered a genius. But I knew, his affairs were sand on the water. He used schemes that I myself once came up with. And I did not think that I could still remember. I called my old acquaintance from banking supervision. One letter was enough to start the checks. I didn't even say it outright, I just hinted where to look. Vyacheslav doesn't know it's me. And he won't find out. He just suddenly saw the empire crumbling. Not from the impact. From the cracks he himself left. Next up is Marina, my daughter. She always wanted to look perfect. On social media, photos from trips, children in white, dinners on the terrace. But I knew that behind the facade was emptiness. And the knowledge I had was sharper than a knife. I made sure that her husband found out about the invisible expenses from the family account. He is an accountant, a pedant. Doubt is the best worm in a relationship. And it is already sharpening her peace of mind. She doesn't know where it comes from. But I know that this is just the beginning. And the grandson. Bohdan. He is 20. He is studying, lives with a gadget in his hand. Once he wrote to me, "Grandpa, don't write to me anymore, it's strange." At that time, I was clutching my phone so tightly that my bones were crunching. But I didn't answer. Now I answered differently. I created an account on behalf of a classmate. Pseudo-empathetic, with brotherly concern. Gradually, I collected from open sources everything that Bohdan was hiding, cancelled coursework, fake certificates, even photos from a party where he was in a state that clearly contradicts his university's policy. I didn't publish it. No. I just sent a copy to the rector. And then the system did its thing. Everything looks like an internal check. No one sees the old grandfather behind the scenes. I knew that power is not in action. Power is in control. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted them to look at themselves the way I look at them. Without respect. Without embellishment. At the same time, I spread some rumors in the old business environment. That some have moral skeletons. Not direct accusations, hints. And the world of corporate sharks did the rest. My children lost support. Friends turned away. Patrons disappeared. They didn't understand why. Because they didn't see the blow. Because I was in the shadows. But revenge is not only against the family. Dr. Savchuk, who brushed me off. Now he has an audit. I made sure that a letter of complaint reached the management, not from me, but from the Public Organization for the Protection of the Elderly. It contained exact quotes from his arrogant words. And I know how to write statements that cannot be ignored. Each of them got their own. And I didn't even notice who was holding the strings. Because I don't push, I push. I don't punish, I guide. I have meaning again. My life is no longer empty. It is filled with action. System. Order. And although I'm not getting any younger, I have regained what they wanted to take away, myself. I don't want apologies. I don't expect gratitude. My task is not to destroy, but to teach. Through pain. Through loss. Through fear. Because they had everything, and lost it. And I had only emptiness, and made a plan out of it. The game is not over yet. But I can already see something new appearing in their eyes. Not arrogance. But anxiety. And maybe a crumb of respect. I didn't get any applause. No one said, "You were right, thank you, Dad, thank you for opening our eyes." No one brought flowers. No one called in the middle of the night to apologize. But something had changed. The silence in my house was no longer empty. It was full. It breathed. Because now it wasn't about forgetting. It was about control. I had become the master of my time again. I didn't break them in, I just opened the door. And let them through. But not where they were used to. But into myself. And, probably, for the first time in years, they saw who they had become. Because people often don't know what they've become until they face the consequences. A few weeks passed. Marina arrived without warning. She sat in the kitchen, was silent for a long time. "Dad," she finally said, "you once said that the truth hurts." I silently placed a cup of tea in front of her. For the first time in years, she didn't talk about vacations, children, or being busy. She just sat there, as if she had seen where she was for the first time. I didn't answer. Because there was no need. She already knew. Her son didn't call. But I know, his business is crashing. I know that his colleagues have turned away. That his wife is now asking why everything is falling apart. He doesn't attribute it to me. But he feels that something has shifted. And, most importantly, he no longer speaks to me in a condescending manner. There is a weight in his voice that I remember from the days when I was still his role model, not a burden. "Grandson, he is afraid of me." Yes, I can see it. It is difficult for him to look me in the eye. But now he knows that behind every wrinkle is experience. That old age is not a flaw, but potential. And that his relic knows how to play hard, like a chess player in a tournament with no room for error. I sometimes walk around the city. Slowly. People pay attention. Not because I am noisy, no. I am calm. But my posture no longer shows defeat. There are no tears in my eyes, but intelligence. People don't like to look survivors in the eye because it brings shame. I went into the hospital. Dr. Savchuk greeted me. Alone. And even asked how I was feeling. In passing, of course. But with respect. I said, "It's better now." And we both understood that it's not about the body. I don't live for revenge. I live for the sake of renewing myself. They wanted to squeeze me into a frame, old, weak, superfluous. I broke the frame. And left the canvas. Age doesn't take away strength, age shows who you are without decorations. When status, success, youth fly off you, the core remains. And if it's strong, if it hasn't rotted, you can stand even when everyone has turned their backs. I didn't forgive. And I don't want to. Because forgiveness is mercy, and I'm not God. I didn't destroy. I taught. Cold. Ruthless. And therein lies my justice. My name means something again. Not because it is spoken, but because it is no longer ignored. I, Noel, remain. Not a shadow. Not a ghost. But a reminder. For them. For myself. And for a world that has not yet learned to respect the silence of an old man. Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.